Hey, Dennis O'Brien back again on Let's Talk About It. We have a great show for you tonight. It hasn't been on in a while, but it wasn't that long ago. J. Michael Callahan, I call him Mike. He is the chairman of the Wyndham High School Renovate as New committee, which has been functioning now for what, 3 years now?
That's
More than
correct.
three?
Yeah, more than three.
More than 3 years now, and he's also, by the way, the chairman of the Water Commission.
That's
And
correct.
for that you've been doing for a long, long time.
Like
20?
24 years.
24 years.
Too
Wow.
many. Too many.
This is the best kept secret. He is the best kept secret in Wyndham, but we don't want him to be a secret. That's why we have him on the radio, and doing all kinds of great things for the town. So Susan Johnson is here as well. She's looking at me, waiting for me to give her a name. Tell them I'm here, Dennis. You're giving me that. Tell them I'm here, Dennis.
Yes,
Look,
I was. Yeah, because I always, when
now
I
you're going to
introduce,
take over, right? You're going
I
to
always
interrupt
say,
me and take over.
It's not an interruption. You gave me the lead way in, and I said,
No, I
I
didn't.
will take it. Oh, yes, you did.
I didn't
And
call
I
on
just want
you.
to say how great it is to have Mike Callahan here, who's done so many wonderful things with it, whether it's at the waterworks or it's doing the high school renovate as new. We are thrilled that you use your expertise to donate your time and help the town with so many great things. I mean, I just want to say thank you for all that work you did also at the waterworks, putting the solar panels in there back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much did that save? And then, huge amount
Yeah,
of money.
yeah. It's a 100 kV system, and it's paid for itself already, and now all the electricity that we generate is essentially free. So that was the primary motivation there, is to lower our operating costs.
I love that. And then you also took care. You got the pump going again, that big giant pump, which is something I've always found incredibly fascinating. And tell us a teeny bit about that too.
Yeah, sure. So at the water department, or at the water company, which was established in the late 1800s, initially the water was pumped through the system here in the borough of Willimantic using a water turbine. And at that point, there was no electricity or electric pumps. So the way to get water through a system was either with steam power. You'd have to generate steam, which would drive steam turbines, which would drive pumps. But back then, in the late 1800s, the original designers decided to use the water turbine. And although it's not the original turbine, we've always had a turbine, some type of water power at the water department all the way back to the late 1800s. And as Susan alluded to, a number of years ago, there was a mechanical failure in one of the control components. And fortunately, or unfortunately, the manufacturer could not get people out here to repair it in a timely manner. So we have a really great water department staff, and the mechanic and the staff there just jumped right in, figured out what the problem was, went to a local machine shop, had the part refabricated, and actually installed it themselves and got it up and operational. So, again, that's it's an alternative energy. So there's no carbon emissions associated with that, and with the PV. So we have a pretty significant green footprint at the water department.
Fabulous.
And it works well, and the water's terrific.
Yeah, you also were involved in the change in back in the day when we added more testing, and then all of a sudden we started getting great reports on the taste and quality of our water. Tell us a teeny bit about that too.
Yeah, so I really want to give a pretty significant shout out to the staff, in particular the superintendent. That group down there has got a very forward-looking outlook. We have a great operator who is the individual responsible for treating the water. He's been with the water department for quite some time, and is primarily responsible for the quality. And the Wyndham Water Works has won a number of water quality awards, which essentially that you go up against other water departments in the state, and they've won on a number of occasions. And most recently, this year, we were awarded the best small water department in New England. So
Wow.
there's, and again, I can't take any credit for that.
Well, come on.
Well, the Water Commission sets broad policy and budget, but
Right.
a good deal of those initiatives come from the
From
staff.
staff, yeah.
And I should add, right now we're in a pretty significant long-term planning process where we're looking at 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and part of that plan is to reevaluate our pump house and maybe include the installation of additional turbines. That's not a foregone conclusion, but it's certainly part of our planning process.
We are so lucky to have you, Mike Callahan, as the chair of the Water Department and working on all those things with your expertise as an engineer. It really, really helps. That background and knowledge really helps people understand on the commission exactly what is going on, and it helps you drive the information to people who aren't necessarily engineers, but very, very focused on making sure that we have the best water, and we have great systems to make sure that people get the water. So, and one other little thing about the water is just you have been going around. I do love water, and I love talking about water.
I can see that. I hear that.
But I know you're going around testing to make sure that the places that we may or may not have lead pipes, and also those connections. And if you want to just tell us a little bit about how that's been going.
Sure. So it was very common, again, back in the late 1800s, that all the piping, with the exception of the mains in the street, were lead pipes. So there was lead pipe from the water pipe in the street into almost every building. Well, it was lead pipe from the street into every building. As probably most people are aware, it became apparent in the late 1950s that lead was in fact getting into people's water because of those mains and faucets and other sources. So there was a pretty significant movement to eliminate lead piping. The Windham Water Works has actually been working on a lead pipe removal program for a long, long time. However, there still are a number of lead services in Windham, in the water department, and recently the federal government mandated that all water departments throughout the country not only identify where those lead services are, but remove them. Now, in some ways, I certainly understand the value of that program, but here in Willimantic, because of treatment processes, we've been able to ensure that the amount of lead that does get into any services is really, really small. If you treat the water correctly, it puts an oxide coating on the inside of the pipe, and that prevents the lead from actually getting into the water.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and the water department's been doing that for decades. But primarily and very much likely due to the Flint, Michigan disaster that occurred a number of years ago, the federal government really started to focus on lead in water systems. And I agree with the idea is, let's just get rid of it all over a period of time. And we've just completed a entire system-wide assessment to identify any remaining lead services in the community. We have to submit that documentation to the state, and then we're hoping over the next couple of years they'll take the information from all the municipalities and private water departments and then put forth a directive in terms of how to go about removing those lead services. We're pretty much on top of that. We've already done some preliminary planning about what methodologies we'll use to remove lead services, what kind of cost it will involve. And of course, we've been one of the key undertakings of our superintendent is he's been focusing on looking for grants so that all the water ratepayers aren't necessarily paying for this work. So over the last 6 months, there's been a pretty significant effort of knocking on doors, trying to get into people's basements so that the water department staff could inspect the pipe to confirm if the pipe was either copper or lead. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure we're not 100% there, but we're very, very close. So that was a very taxing, took a lot of time to the staff, but we'll be moving on into the next phase, and that is what are the remedies? How do we go about removing those pipes, and what time frame and what cost?
I heard that sometimes they have brass pipes as well.
That's correct.
And so, what would the impact be? Copper, brass, lead. I mean, how does brass work within the piping system? Because I think that we have brass pipe.
Yeah, you very well could. Brass piping was typically not used in the ground between the street and the home. That was either initially lead, and then sometimes a galvanized piping, which is steel with a galvanized zinc coating, was used, and then more recently copper has been used. It's very unlikely that you would have brass from the house to the street. You would have brass in the home for the piping inside. Some brass piping has fittings that might have lead in it, but typically brass was, they didn't solder to the fittings, they would thread the fittings, so the amount of lead, the likelihood of finding lead in brass pipe is relatively low. Now, you might find it in your fixtures, in your water faucets. Sometimes they use lead solder to solder the components on there. So, again, the fact that we treat the water is, even if there was lead in the brass, and there certainly is lead solder was used on copper pipes. And the fact that we treat the water, like I said, really diminishes the likelihood that any of that lead would leach into the water. So
Very good. Well, we have a combination of copper, steel, all different types.
Yeah.
The house was built in 1938,
Yep.
so there may have been things going on after World War I in terms of resources that
Yep.
would have created quite a mix. And just one last little thing, and then I'll turn it over to Dennis. But,
Well, I
but
have just one point to make
but-
about
but,
water.
Yeah, sure. But the fact is when you have mixed pipes, like you have the copper, steel, these different types of pipes, sometimes that can cause an electric charge in the piping. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, yep, that's called it's a galvanic reaction. It's when you have dissimilar metals, copper and brass, copper and steel. Any type of difference in metal, depending on the pH of the water, or if those metals are in other fluids, you will get this galvanic action. And what happens is it creates corrosion.
Right.
And it'll either create pin leaks in some of your piping, or you'll even, on the outside, sometimes you can see, if you ever looked at a corroding battery,
Right.
that's I don't know what that's made up of, but
Sure.
you essentially, the material, and corrosion is rust is a specific term for corrosion. It's when you get metals interacting with each other and they create other molecules which are not as strong as the metal. So you get corrosion, and sometimes you get this, like I said, I don't even know what it is, but it's this white puffy stuff.
Well, you've answered some of my questions about that, because I'm very curious about how all these things interact. And Dennis is laughing at me because he's seeing how he's had to suffer living with me with these kinds of questions. Go ahead,
I
Dennis.
couldn't answer a question like that. I don't even want to hear it. All I want to say is, we talk about, every time the mic comes on and we talk about water, we talk about the taste, and it's wonderful.
Yep.
And I was spoiled because I grew up in the city of New Britain, as a lot of our listeners know, because I mention it from time to time. Tyler Griffin always makes fun of me because he said, "When is Dennis going to say that he's from New Britain?" He used to help us with our TV show. And he used to say, "We're going to bet on how long it takes before he talks about New Britain." And today I'm going to do that. In fact, we had a guy come to the house today, a young guy, who said he graduated from New Britain High School in 2016.
And he came out with your term, hard-hitting New Britain.
Hard-hitting New Britain. That's right. It was
There you
hard.
go, there you
It was
go.
hard-hitting. It was true. It's a true term. But anyway, the water was excellent. It tasted so good. And after I became a lawyer for Connecticut Legal Services, I worked all over the state. And everywhere I went, except Willimantic, the water tasted flat. It did not taste good. It was not fun to drink.
Yep.
And you know what? The water in Willimantic is excellent in terms of, and I think for a while there, Willimantic was vying with New Britain for the best tasting water.
They very well could have
I
been.
think they were.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they were. And I'm sure if I go back to New Britain and have some water, it'll taste almost the same as it does here. And it's fantastic. And water is something we all take for granted.
Yep.
But having Mike talk about the waterworks and all the great things they've done and that they're doing to make sure our water is not only tastes good but is safe and does what it's supposed to do for us, which is a lot. Is so important. I want to switch gears now and talk about the high school renovation. And you've been at it now for more than 3 years, and we're getting down to, I think the initial estimate is that you could get the project done in December of 2024, and that's coming up, and I think we're on schedule. You want to talk a little bit about the beginnings and how how it has developed? You've had a really good committee to work with, I think, and some good contractors.
Yep. Well, that's you're right, Dennis. The original projected completion date was December 2024. We're on track for that. For all practical purposes, we will be done with construction probably by mid-October or the end of October. There's all projects have various stages. We're certainly much past the most disruptive sort of core part of the renovation. So between now and the ultimate completion of the project, there'll be a number of activities that we have to undertake. So the remaining work right now, the tennis courts are under renovation. We're expecting the tennis courts to be 100% complete by the end of October. The media center, which was the last major phase of the project, is just wrapping up. They're moving new furniture in. The architect and other consultants are doing what is called a punch list. They go in to compare to determine if the work was actually done in accordance with the drawings and the specifications. So they're right in the middle of that process. And then throughout the remaining part of the building, there's what we have. We have final testing and balancing of all of the systems. That's a part of a project that sometimes is overlooked and is often misunderstood. Once you install a complicated system, and by the systems I mean the heating, air conditioning, and ventilating systems, they require you just can't turn the switch on. You can, but sometimes they don't work as expected. So there's often a phase in the project where the contractor and we have what's called a commissioning agent and the design professionals work together to find out why the systems may not be working, make adjustments, actually maybe even make physical changes. A lot of times it's just setting up the controls, or sometimes wires get switched, things like that. So we have, for the whole building, we have the testing and balancing phase that we're right in the middle of. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's the punch list. The design team will go throughout the whole building, including the site, and they will check the work relative to the drawings to make sure that the work was done in accordance with our requirements. There's also a training phase. The school's systems, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, were designed in the late 60s, early 70s. They were contemporary and state of the art at the time, but the technology has changed significantly. Yes. So the systems that are in place now are, I continually remind the staff as well as the Board of Ed, it's a pretty complicated system. We've gone from no air conditioning to air conditioning.
Right.
The building was not designed with the space above the ceiling with the idea of air conditioning. So we've had to, as the old proverbial expression goes, we've got 10 pounds of fill in the blank in a 5-pound bag. So we've had to pretty much put a lot of systems above the ceiling, and that makes it difficult to maintain and get access to. So there's this training phase that is really important because these systems are very sophisticated. We've gone from manual controls to highly automated controls. Everything is computerized. There's a thermostat in every room room temperature individually can be controlled. We monitor the CO2 levels in each room to make sure we have adequate ventilation. You can adjust ventilation depending on occupancy. So it's a very sophisticated system. So making sure the staff and our vendors that are going to be servicing the systems are up to speed and understand the complexity is really important.
I just want to thank you for that, because even with the old systems, I don't think that a lot of the technical staff was able to maintain HVAC systems the way they should have been, making sure that they were changing the filters like they should. I mean, and just trying to do that work. So thank you for creating this wonderful system with better air mix, and also opportunities for students to be in the school system during the warmer months as well. And then just training people, understanding that the people who have to maintain and operate these systems must be trained.
Yep.
And that's huge. That's big. And they must have they have to have any kind of technical experience or certification for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping near the end of my comments, I'm hoping you'll give me an opportunity to talk about sort of the lessons learned on this project, and this conversation about training is a really good segue. And I've in my entire professional career, I've always liked to take my own experience on projects and then try to incorporate them into the next undertaking. And I think, and I'm hoping, I should say, that the town takes the experience we've had on the high school, the good parts and some of the bad parts, and try to incorporate that into institutional knowledge, and then use that knowledge on projects that go forward. And so one of the things I'm hoping that comes out of this is a deep appreciation that as we move forward, in our lives and things get more and more complicated, it does require a different outlook. And going to your question about training, I recommended to the Board of Ed, and I believe they're considering it, is that they hire at least one full-time certified HVAC technician. So there are credentials for maintenance staff who have the knowledge, the training, and the experience particularly in refrigeration. Refrigeration is a fairly complicated technology, as well as experience in controls, because everything in the building has got some kind of electronic control. So it's software, it's sitting on the computer, it's having an app on your phone to allow you to diagnose as well as figure out what's going on. If someone calls and said, "I'm freezing in room 101," well, the staff can actually dial into room 101. Is it really they're freezing because it's cold in the room, or are they freezing because they're just cold? And everybody has a different body type that,
Yes.
They react, so 74 degrees might be cold to one person and warm to another.
Yep.
So it's really important. So is there a problem or just an adjustment? So this training is really important, and bringing that expertise to the table is really essential. So it's another recommendation that I made, and I think is a sound one, is that, and I believe the school district is moving in this direction, is they're are likely, if they haven't already, they're likely to have to hire service contractors to help with some of this work. So this is the overall project was $112 million. The physical construction was just under $100 million. So you cannot expect to be able to maintain a building with the technologies that we were using, or the budget that we were using, or the staff that we were using 20 years ago.
Sure.
And that's something I hope tonight's meeting, here, this radio show, and other, hopefully meetings I have with the Board of Ed, helps get that message out. And that is, we have a brand new very modern, sophisticated building, and that's going to demand some attention.
That's fabulous, and that's one of the things what we will do with this show, of course, is we have a podcast. I put it on. It goes onto YouTube podcast. It goes to cable access, and I also blast it on on the Capitol. So we have that e-blast there, and you will get a copy of it that you can share with the Board of Ed. And make sure that they see some of the things that we've talked about so that they will understand what we have to do, because having this wonderful system and not having the right training to operate it is really something that we really must make sure we do that, because it will maintain the system. It will make it so that you don't have maybe a problem with a functional breakdown that could be addressed with some little tweak, as opposed to waiting for it to go awry completely. And so those are the kinds of the things that I'm really focused on. Of course, since we had COVID, I was very focused on HVAC, and I mentioned it initially about to people at the Capitol all over, and then about a year later, people started to talk about HVAC like it was something new. It was like, but it is an important thing, and how we circulate the air is something I've always been interested in since the energy crisis in the 70s, when we started to shut the buildings up, not change the filters, and not mix the air like we should. So this is great that you're doing that, and those are the kinds of things that I've been focused on for a very long time. But and now Dennis is going to say, what are we doing?
It's time for a break. Matt Rupar is here telling us we need to take our mid-show break. So we will be right back after some words from our wonderful sponsors.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien, and our very special guest who works all over town all the time for us, Mike Callahan. And now we're going to transition from his amazing work in the waterworks we just started to talk about the high school renovated new systems and all the different things that are going on there. And we're coming up on the conclusion of that project. And so we're just going to turn this over to you, Mike. And Dennis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mike has a special announcement to make to a very special person. Mike, go ahead.
Well, Dennis and Susan have given me this opportunity to do a shout out to my mother. On Sunday, my mother's going to turn 102 years. We have a big, very fun planned gathering for her from my family and friends.
Well, I just want to say happy birthday to your mother, Mike Callahan.
Yeah.
Dennis?
So she's Mrs. Callahan?
Well, it's Norma Callahan.
Norma Callahan?
Oh, actually, you
All
should
right.
call her Mrs. Callahan.
Mrs.
That's
Callahan,
her
happy birthday, Mrs. Callahan, 102 years old.
All right.
You are setting a great example for the rest of us. I just became an octogenarian last year, and you have inspired me, along with some other people I know who are older, and to keep going, because life is wonderful. Thank you so much, and happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right.
And thank you for giving us Mike Callahan.
Yes,
Fantastic.
we're very pleased with him.
Actually, John Michael Callahan, but we call him Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you prefer that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Mike or Michael?
Mike or Michael's fine.
Very good. And we were off the air. I again asked Michael every time I do, and I forget what type of engineering he specializes in, and you told me
Electrical engineering.
electrical engineering. Okay, perfectly well suited for this project. I would imagine there's lots of more change in that field than in some others.
Yeah.
In terms of, because electricity is wow, you know.
Yeah, and there's sub-disciplines to electrical engineering. As I mentioned, there's electronics, there's power, and then today there's a sort of a marrying of the two. So there's a lot going on.
And he's also had a long career as an engineer in a small firm with Dave Jackson, a guy we know, Susan and I know, because we knew his wife Rhoda, and then later on went to work for Fuss and O'Neill, who was a very big operation in, I think it's situated in Manchester for
That's
the most
correct.
part.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
getting back to the project.
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
About,
Sure.
Since we're talking about electric and there's solar panels at the high school,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask. I was pleased to see. I'm not sure if I see them in the parking area,
Yep.
which I think is a great idea. And I like that idea of putting things in parking areas
Mm-hmm.
like solar panels for numerous reasons. They'll protect the car in the rain, and
Yep.
when you get out of your car, you're not having to worry about your umbrella. But also, it's not taking up room in areas where you could be growing things, or maybe even on a roof. You have to replace the roof, or it might be easier even to change the panels when they're over a parking lot. And and plus your background in this area of electricity, just thought generation. This is an electric generating situation. If you want to give us a few tips on that.
Sure. So we did include photovoltaic on the project with the goal of, again, saving the town every year money. Typically on a project like this, you would put the panels on the roof, on the flat roof, for a number of reasons. Primarily, it's less expensive because the structure is already there and you're just putting them on the roof. However, on the high school, the building, the structural steel was not designed to carry the additional load. Now, some buildings have plenty of steel, and putting supplemental panels on after the fact is okay. But we did an analysis, and it turns out we did not have the structural steel wouldn't support the additional weight of the panels. So, as you said, Susan, what we did is we did sort of what are often called carports. So we have steel structures in the south parking lot and the north parking lot, and then we have a row of the bus drop-off. It's essentially it's a canopy over the bus drop-off area for the kids. So the systems, the capacity is 312 kW, which is it's not a large system, but it's reasonable size. It should save the town in two ways. It'll reduce their electric bill by the amount of power that it generates, and then the town will be able to sell what's called renewable energy credits, so which are meant to address the climate issues. The renewable energy credits are an incentive for people to invest in solar, so that we're driving more toward a green economy or a green energy system. So that was an important element for me to include in the project. And again, there's incentives. The building is not LEED certified, but we chose another incentive program where you make provisions. We insulated the exteriors of the wall. We use photovoltaic. We have fairly efficient energy systems. We have energy controls. We have dedicated electric charging stations. We have designated spaces for green vehicles and things like that. So.
Could you just describe what LEED energy system is?
Yeah, so LEED certification is a program. It's strictly a volunteer program for either existing building or people that are building new buildings, and it's essentially it's like giving yourself a gold star, and then being able to brag about it. Mm-hmm. And it's been a program that's been around for probably about 2 decades now, maybe a little bit less. And again, it's really a kind of a socially driven initiative to encourage people to incorporate energy conservation measures into their building. Mm-hmm. And there's it's a great program. There's some really positive elements of it. There's some downsides, and so we chose not to do LEED certification for a number of reasons, but we picked another program similar that was a better fit for the kind of constraints that we faced in our project. Mm-hmm. So
very good. So what were the constraints? I wonder a little bit.
It's a good segue, Susan. So part of the challenges, we've had a number of challenges on this project.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges was that to the building committee is that we were given a mandate, or at least I assumed the way I treated it was a mandate, to renovate like new as opposed to a new building. So renovate, not build a new building. We had a budget, and we had some criterion in terms of the schedule. And I felt, as the chairman, and the building committee agreed, that we really needed to take that charge and go forward. And again, not being critical at all, but just with the benefit of hindsight, it's my opinion today we would have been better off to build a new building. And I don't want to take away from all the good things from the project, but that was a significant. So the constraints associated with that, we had to renovate the fields without any swing space. We had to renovate the school without any swing space. We did not rent modulars, which are, when you renovate schools, a lot of times people rent modular classrooms.
Sure.
We wanted to avoid that cost. And we were lucky enough that the school, the number of students was really much less than what it was designed for. So we were able to create swing space within the building. So, there was a swing space, which meant the kids were moving around and we had to renovate and demolish certain areas. The site constraints were pretty significant in terms of redoing the fields in the context of a renovation. And then, as I mentioned to you, the floor-to-ceiling height in the high school was much shorter or smaller than if you had a new building. You would have had space above the ceilings. So there were a number of physical constraints that had to be incorporated in the project. And that impacted schedule, it impacted budget. It actually impacted pretty significantly the relationship between the players on the project. So they were, I don't want to say they were extreme, because they were not. They were also fairly typical of renovation projects.
Sure.
You just, things, I like the expression, of it's like watching sausage being made.
Yes.
You might love sausage, but watching it be made is not a fun experience.
We're used to that. Being involved in, I was involved in legislative activity when I was on the town council, and Susan's been a legislator, and that's what how they describe making legislation.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. That's how we do
So,
it.
we
Yeah.
understand.
I mean, when we changed the law, instead of giving the reimbursement rates for new schools all the time, we realized we were building lots of schools and leaving a lot of empty schools.
Yep.
And Connecticut's kind of a small state, and where would we find more room to put this school in, or where would we put the students if we just ripped it down and had to find a place for them? So there was really a logistical problem in terms of how to manage something like that, and the idea of the conservation idea of being able to reuse your school buildings and get them done the right way.
That embodied
yeah.
embodied value and energy in existing facilities.
Yes.
It's hard to give up on that. It's hard to tear them down.
Yeah, and don't forget those people, that make those decisions before you got started on this project.
Way long before.
We're not as knowledgeable as you are.
Yeah.
We're not professional
Yeah.
engineers and whatnot.
Well-
and what you're making perfect sense to me today, but I must say that I had people complain that we should have just built a new building, and I was opposed to that.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah.
go with whatever the plan was.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and again, in fairness, it's my opinion. I completely supported the renovate like new when the town voted for it, because it's my opinion the voters would not. They would have voted to do nothing.
Right.
And
Right.
and that would have been
Bad.
very bad.
Yeah.
The state was strongly pushing renovate like new.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And there was plenty of precedent and plenty of good examples where renovate like new. And again, I don't think we have a bad result by any stretch. I
Oh,
think
no.
we have a very
No,
good-
no, no.
I,
It should,
very
but
good
I
it,
can hardly wait to see
Yeah,
it.
It's
yeah.
very, very
Oh, if
interesting.
you haven't been there, Dennis, you definitely
I
should
have not
go.
been there.
It really is
We've
great.
gotta
I
go
have not
through.
been there.
It's-
Yeah.
We're going to go through. I think it's in September. I think it's the end of
September
the-
26th, I
I
believe.
think, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
so.
you should definitely, if they have the ribbon cutting,
All
you
excited.
definitely should
Very
go.
excited.
For the early childhood
Yeah.
part, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Very
let's.
good. Yeah,
So one of the things I'd like to say relative to the status of the project, as of today, We're not done, but as of today, we are under budget, which was been one of my specific objectives, and I had a very, very specific reason for that, or a couple of reasons. One of them is I think it's important that building committees and any group that undertakes projects, you really are committed to staying within budget. I think it's really critical, just on basic principle. That's the Scotchman in me, and the old Yankee New England.
All right.
I think it's important that you commit to certain things, and both what the outcome is and what the cost is. But the most important reason is I have a very I very much enjoy living in Willimantic. I have my complaints about a lot of things in this town.
Me too.
And I think my outlook is we can always do better. And so I'm very forward looking, but I also recognize you have to have some sense of what you want to do, and you have to commit to doing it well. And so my outlook about bringing this project in on budget is that I want to set a good example, and I want to demonstrate to the taxpayers and the community members that this town and the people that are active in it can do really good things, and we can do things without spending more money than the taxpayers authorize. So I'm excited, and again, I'm hoping we pull this off. We're pretty close. We're pretty close to a soft landing. That's my goal, is because I want to see the new elementary school get built. And I want to be able for the leaders in this town to go back to the voters and the taxpayers and say, hey, listen, we've had a number of very successful projects here in town. We have a wonderful community center. We've got the parking that people I know weren't super happy with, but I think it makes a big difference in town.
They're happy about it now, I think.
Right. And
Thursday people are happy.
Yep. and the vendors in town are as well. And I'm happy because I can park close to the library and the town hall.
Right.
So I think it's important that the folks that are active in town look forward and say, okay, this isn't just a project being done today. It's the precursor to future projects.
Yes.
And we need to demonstrate by example that we're responsible and, more importantly, capable of pulling this off. And I think that's as a community, we should hold each other to that standard. We should recognize life presents lots of complications, and you gotta sort of put your dukes up and work hard to get things done. You have to pay attention. You have to work hard and stick to a handful of principles. And for me, my guiding principle, and I'll share with it at the water department, is I have 3 priorities for the water department. Treat the water. That's our number one goal.
Yep.
Make sure we have water for fire protection, and make sure we have water for economic development. So if we're doing things at the water department, you can't check off all or one of those, we're not doing it.
Right.
We're not interested in spending a lot of time mowing the grass. We're interested in those 3 things.
I love that, and that's exactly because you know where you are. You know where you are here in Willimantic and Windham and Eastern Connecticut, and that is just fabulous because you're really oriented to who we are as a community and what we need. And part of that is making sure all these things work, but making sure people have faith in the economic development that we do, because that is so important. Oh, you've got 2 more minutes, so
Okay.
I want to give those 2 minutes to you.
We better.
I've chatted too much.
So the other thing that I really want to press or push on is, without exception, that the students and the staff were absolutely phenomenal. And I assume their parents and the staff spouses I didn't have a lot of direct interaction with the students or staff, but I know the consultants did, and the contract